Ladies and gentlemen of Buckeye Nation and college football fans everywhere, welcome back to another hard-hitting scarlet and gray soaked edition of the OHIO podcast. I am your host, the Wild Man Chris Wilds, and tonight, man, we got ourselves a spicy topic. And if I'm gonna have a spicy topic, I better have a spicy co-host. So we brought in the Wolverine Slayer TG on this one. TG, how are things?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm fiery. Not as fiery as I normally would be because I'm not gonna lie, I've kind of been getting my energy drained in the house. But I'm still fired up for this topic, mainly because this is another case of the SEC trying to be the SEC. So,
Absolutely. Before we dive into the drama, do me a favor, like, subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell so you will never miss a new episode when a hot take drops like we got today. Inside scoops and all things Ohio State football right here on the OHIO podcast. So let's go ahead and jump in to our topic. And this is news from the last few days. I think it was about 4 days ago this happened.
yep.
But, my first thought was maybe this kid isn't that stupid. Maybe this is something somebody's posted up there. You know, no,
Yep.
no, I think the kid actually is this, just lacks this much intelligence. And I'm talking about Vanderbilt quarterback Diego Pavia. Now, you might ask, why in the world is the OHIO podcast talking about the Vanderbilt quarterback? Well, on a recent interview of Bussin' with the Boys podcast, Pavia dropped this little gem, and I'm gonna quote this, and I pulled this off of On3. If you want to play with the best, you don't want to play with the Big Ten. You ignore those calls. The SEC, it's like week after week, you are going to get beat on. The Big Ten, you're not gonna get beat on with Purdue, Nebraska. So, TG, I just want to get your take on that first.
Isn't Vanderbilt the Purdue of the SEC, if I'm not mistaken?
I think that is a very fair assessment to make.
And Purdue's been more successful than them in the past decade, if not this century. So, like, I don't know what he's talking about. Because at least Purdue has actually beaten a team like Ohio State before, multiple times. Where this is your first time beating Bama in a long time.
And Vanderbilt, correct me if I'm wrong, but they haven't been at all relevant since the days of James Franklin down there as the head coach.
Yep.
And we all know what kind of simp that guy is. But you talk about Vanderbilt, and they are a team that did they shock some people this last year?
Yes.
They absolutely did. And it was actually until this almost said something unfriendly until this guy decided to come out and run his mouth that I was actually, I was very hopeful for Vanderbilt. I mean, I felt like this was a team that I could really, get to enjoy watching. Now, they talk about how great they are. 7-6. 7-6 is where Vanderbilt finished last year. 3-5 in the conference. Now, is this a case of Pavia, in your opinion, trying to justify his conference losses? Or does he actually believe that the SEC is a better conference than the conference who has produced the two last national championships, one with an asterisk?
Yeah, I think it's somewhere in the middle where I do believe he's trying to justify those losses, but at the same time, I can see if he believes it. But this is also because this is something that's being told to him. And this is my other point with with Pavia, the Vanderbilt quarterback. Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't the SEC lose to the Big Ten last year in bowl games?
Bowl
Like,
games, it was 5-1 in the Big Ten. It
yep.
was 5-1 versus the SEC.
And this
Now,
is where
historically,
and think about it too. This is the first time where the Big Ten had no players sitting out in those bowl games, and neither did the
yes.
SEC for that matter. These were teams that were going head to head, straight up with full rosters, and the Big Ten beat the SEC when they were nobody sat
And,
out.
and you look at that. Well, I mean, yeah, you're talking about that obviously with with you know, when you're talking about the playoffs and you talk about obviously Tennessee, Texas, that Ohio State took care of in the playoff. But
Hmm.
you look, uh, the scum, who to our knowledge did not cheat this year, actually set several players and took care of Alabama.
That's because Jalen Milroe sucks as a quarterback. I'm not gonna lie.
You know, you go in there and you look at what happened with Illinois and South Carolina, who,
Hmm.
I was obvious. I really will be honest. I was thinking South Carolina was
Gonna
really
beat
a more,
Illinois.
well, I thought they were a more fitting playoff team than Tennessee, to be honest. They
And
were
then
they were hot at the end of the season.
yeah, and then they go and get beat by Illinois, and you're like, you would have thought, like most, trust me, most bettors predicted that South Carolina would beat Illinois, and then Illinois just beats them. And think about it, you got Dylan Stewart. I watched that game. I'm like, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't South Carolina supposed to have better defense than Illinois? Like, how is Illinois outdoing y'all? How is their offense blocking y'all? How is their offense outperforming your defense? How's their defense outperforming your offense? I think you're supposed to have a better offense. So it's like something was wrong there.
I truly believe if we look at this right now, and I'm probably going to get some pushback on this, but I will say I believe right now the level of not just play, I think it's directly correlated to the level of coaching in the Big Ten is actually better. Um, with the retirement of Nick Saban, let's call it what it is. If you're an SEC fan and you're on board with this comment he made, unless you're playing for Alabama,
Georgia, LSU.
Georgia, LSU might make an argument, but it'd be an outside argument.
But I mean,
Bama
they're
and
the only
Georgia have
team.
carried that conference for a decade.
Yeah, but I will say this: LSU is the third team in that conference and the only team to have won a national championship that ain't Georgia or Bama. So they got an argument to say that just because they won three national titles. Obviously, one with Saban. They won one in 2007 against us. They made it to. I think they almost made it against Bama, but they lost. And in 2019, they ended up winning with the greatest team. For granted,
Uh,
they have the worst coach, but still, they're the only. That's the only team that has actually
Yeah.
carried that conference. Those three teams. That's it.
Some people will give you some flack and talk about Florida. Florida hasn't been relevant since Urban left.
Right.
So yes, I won't even call it a 3 horse race for the SEC. It's a 2.5 horse race. Um, so to me, for them to sit there and cast these aspersions is ridiculous, absolutely insane. Because the fact is, guys, this is not the same SEC. You have lost your leader.
Mhm.
Nick Saban is the reason the SEC was great. It
Yeah.
wasn't Bama, it wasn't Georgia, it was Nick Saban.
Mhm. And a Buckeye coach at that.
Correct. Absolutely.
So like a
And
Buckeye coach is what made the SEC what it is. A Big Ten coach, essentially.
and somehow, according to Pavia, a team that's lucky to win 3 games in the SEC is tougher than a Big Ten team.
You do like
God, I wish we could have put them on our schedule.
dude, I would tell you this straight up that if they went against the middle tier of the Big Ten, I think the middle tier of the Big Ten would beat Vanderbilt like no tomorrow. Because if you look at the middle tier of the Big Ten, it's better than the SEC right now. The
Oh,
top
without
tier,
a doubt.
without a doubt, and the top tier of the Big Ten is better than the SECs as well, which is something we never thought we'd say. Is but and you also have to look at it like this too when it comes to the SEC. And we just had like Kangaroo Black and Uncle Lou, but I kind of want to make this assumption because this out of respect.
Yes.
The only reason the SEC had ever been relevant to begin with was because you were paying players and breaking the rules under the table. Without you being able to do that, where Big Ten teams had to try to do more with less. That's what the Big Ten had to learn. So here will be my question for the SEC. Other than Alabama, what team do you have that is capable of making more with less? Because I don't think you have a team that's capable of doing that. The Big Ten has countless teams in this conference that could do that because not only that, you have the better coaching in this conference. You have coaches who've had to do more with less, and they didn't have to buy players to do that. They just did their own thing. And when you look at the Big Ten now, they're starting to get more talent because now they could compete with the SEC. Because guess what? Y'all were spending
Everybody
money.
can buy the players now.
Now everybody can buy the players and do it legally too. And we start to find out that the SEC really don't got money like Big Ten teams. Like Big Ten teams got more
Yeah.
money than most of these SEC teams. If anything, there's only 4 SEC teams that got money. Really, there's
Yeah.
only 4: Tennessee,
And, yeah.
Texas,
Georgia.
Texas A&M. No, Georgia actually don't. It's Oklahoma. Georgia might be in
Well,
the second
Oklahoma
tier.
and Texas have their oil money.
Yeah,
So you got
so
Texas,
those would be the
Texas
top 4.
A&M, Oklahoma.
Those are your top 4, and then
Yeah.
obviously you do got kind of Georgia in that second tier, but that's not a lot of money. Same
No.
with Bama, because if you actually look at it, some of these teams do. I think I seen something where one of those 2 teams, one of those 2 programs, had to have a car washing donation just to get like money into their program. And I'm like, if you had boosters like Texas, Texas A&M, Tennessee, and Oklahoma, you probably would not need that. But the problem is you don't got boosters like those teams. You don't even got boosters like the Big Ten does, because the Big Ten got boosters. Like Washington is a pretty rich program, whether people know that or not.
Well, you
We
got
are
you got your Starbucks money in Washington. You've got
USC, UCLA.
Your Nike money in Oregon. Ohio State's got the Wexners. And who and not just the Wexners, they've got a very big donor base. Possibly one of the best NIL collective groups, if not the best in all of college football.
And if you look at Ohio State and USC, like look at what they were doing to facilitate their NIL deals. Because
Mhm.
as much as I kind of want to rip on USC because their fans have been acting kind of ignorant, I will admit this, they're doing the same thing Ohio State does, which is you look at Ohio State sports stoops, they're starting to facilitate NIL deals with other companies that want to be involved with Ohio State. And trust me, there are a bunch of companies that want to be involved with Ohio State. And not only is Oregon getting Nike money, but Ohio State's also getting some of that too. Not as much as Oregon because of Phil Knight, but ask Nike how much money Ohio State made them when they won the national title.
Yeah. Yeah, and then
So
you look,
like,
you could even make arguments for you've got groups like Caterpillar and things like that out in the Midwest region. You've got, I mean, there is a lot of big money donation. Uh, Michigan. Now we'll see how long it continues to go. Is it going to
oh,
dry up
it's
on them
not.
or not?
Oh no, it already is.
But
It already is.
yeah, but this is a situation. The NIL, the Big Ten's got the upper hand there.
Hmm.
So, I mean, as I look at this, but you mentioned the different tiers, and you want to talk about the different tiers. Okay, I think you've got legitimately, and people are going to get disgruntled when I say this. I think you've got 2 real tier 1 teams in the Big Ten,
You do.
and it's Ohio State and Oregon.
Yeah.
I think those are your 2 tier 1s, not just in NIL, but just the
In
on-field
general.
product. Right now, those are your top tier.
Even though I will say I do question Oregon's defense, but I will say this, they are better than most Big Ten teams right now.
Yes. And then you come down and you've got obviously a tier where you probably put Penn State in tier 2.
Yeah, they are a tier 2 team.
Um,
Top of the tier 2.
USC, perhaps.
They would
But
be in
they
tier
haven't
3.
done
They got to
anything
prove
yet.
that's the thing. For me, they're tier 3 until like they prove to me that they can
So,
be elite. So or
I
in that
mean,
tier
Michigan
2.
is still too new to me to put in there. Even though they had a good season last year, they're too new to put in that next year.
I mean,
Do
they
you look at
I'm not gonna lie,
Michigan in that next year?
they had a bad Big Ten season, but I will give them credit for beating SEC teams and pretty much having a good record to get into the bowl games. But nah, y'all still tier 3 for me. Michigan, you're in tier 3 too. I don't care. You're not one of the top teams in the Big Ten.
It,
You're not even tier 2 to me.
well, and I agree. They're not a top tier team. But if we take off our scarlet and gray shades, do we consider? I mean, given the history, and this hurts me to even mention, do we consider Michigan a solid second tier team, given the fact that as of the moment they still did win the 2022 national championship or 2023 national
23.
championship?
Here's the thing. They have to
And I don't like it,
prove.
TG, but
No, no, no. I get what you're saying, even though there's a huge asterisk next to it. Here's the thing. A long time ago, I would have been willing to say Michigan is a tier 2 team. I would have been willing to say that without, and I'm not saying they're not a tier 2 team without with the scarlet and gray glasses on. I'm not saying that. I'm looking at them from this standpoint. I want to see how Sharon Moore coaches. I want to see how good this program will be moving forward. Because to me, while they finished 8-5, and congrats to them, I want to see if you can be a consistent tier 2 team. Can you have more than just a 8-5 season? Because to me, you have an 8-5 season, you're towards the top of tier 3, but you're not like, because for me to be a tier 2 team, you have to be like 9-3, 10-2 at the utmost. You have to have a really good season and be a playoff contender. And when I look at Michigan right now, they're not a playoff contender. Like, that's what I consider the tier 2 playoff contenders. That is not
Mhm.
Michigan right now.
Okay, so if we look at this and let's just discuss it real quick. We take Oregon, we take Ohio State, we take Alabama, we take Georgia. Right now, in my opinion, the Big Ten is in a better situation with their top tier teams than what you've got in Alabama. You've
Mhm.
got DeBoer down there at Alabama, who I do believe is a good coach. I just think that living in the shadow of a legend like Nick Saban may be more than he's going to be able to handle.
I honestly think people should temper their expectations, thinking that that
Yes,
he's going to
give
be
him three
anything
years.
like that. Like, give him 3 years, because the reality is he's not Nick Saban. He's a good coach, but he ain't Saban. Like Saban, you got from again. I just talked about this for Bama fans. You just got Saban from Ohio State, who's again a program that has produced some of the greatest coaches of all time. Urban Meyer, Jim Tressel, Pete Carroll, who won a Super Bowl with the Seattle Seahawks, by the way,
Yep.
and a national title with the USC Trojans, and Nick Saban, who has cemented himself as the greatest coach of college football. He's basically like the Bill Belichick of college football. So,
Yes.
like, yeah, that's who you got. If you're being honest with yourself, Keller DeBoer is a guy who never really came from a program like an Ohio State, or came from a program that's known for having the greatest coaching. Like, yes, while he came from a elite while he came from a good situation in Washington, the one criticism I have of Kellen DeBoer has always been his defense. It's been the biggest criticism I've had of him for a while, because it's like, and that reared its ugly head in the Alabama game, because I'm not gonna lie, his defense at Alabama sucked, and I'm like, dude,
Yeah.
you got talent on that defense. How is it that it sucks this bad? So I
Well,
would say with him, you got to give it like 3 years for him to figure it out.
then
Because
you look over and you got Kirby Smart at Georgia, who
hmm
arguably you've got the number one and number two coaches in Ryan Day and Kirby Smart right now.
yep.
Um, Kirby's got a serious culture problem at Georgia, though.
Yes.
He's you know when your program has more arrests than it has victories over the last 2 years, and you're a pretty damn good program, that's a problem.
hmm
So I really feel like the Big Ten wins the top tier. Then you look at that middle tier you talk about. Let's take a look at the middle tier. Um, I would say in that middle tier, we're going to put from the Big Ten probably Iowa probably is a middle tier team.
They are. They're more than capable. Because here's the thing. I know I just said with Michigan
Mhm.
that they're, because they've had their consistency of being like this 8-5 team, and they have to prove they can be a playoff contender. But I could tell you this right now, with Iowa, they have always been like a playoff contender, because they have always had and I get it. They were in the
But
Western
they've always had to
Conference.
come up against Ohio State or Michigan,
Yeah, that's
and
been, or
the
Penn
whole
State,
division
or
or
Penn
Penn
State.
State.
And not only that, but I actually do believe that they finally may have figured out an offense, because I watched their offense against Missouri last year.
Mhm.
I'm like, they may finally have an offense, for God's sakes.
Yeah,
And there are times where this team has been a playoff contender. I would say they're at the bottom of tier 2 for the most part, just because I need to see them consistently. But there are times they've been playoff contenders, and I honestly believe that they have what it takes to get to the playoffs and to win a playoff game. I really do believe that with Iowa, because, and if they figured out their offense, shoot, watch out for Iowa, man.
so you have
Because their defense is legendary. It's their, and same with their special teams. It's just their offense needed work. And like I
yeah,
said, if you watch the Missouri game, it looks like they may have found it.
and you talked about it. Penn State probably the top of tier two. Iowa's
Yeah.
the bottom of tier two. I think you've got to put Illinois
Yeah.
in the mix right now. Coming off of a big bowl win over the SEC, South Carolina. But if you look at the losses in their 10-3 record last year, their losses were to Penn State, playoff team, Oregon was number one going into the playoffs in the
Yep.
nation.
And funny enough, that
And
was a
then
close
at
game.
Minnesota.
Yeah. And I think
That's
Minnesota's also a tier two team because they've always been 10-2. And honestly, there are games they should have beaten Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. But what happened to Minnesota was they kept dealing with injuries or the
yeah,
quarterback play sucked.
CJ Stroud's first game. Honestly, I think if Ibrahim didn't
Yeah,
go down,
they
they probably
probably
beat
win.
Ohio State.
They probably do, and that's what I'm saying. It's like Minnesota's always had the talent. It's just that injuries has always hurt them, like to their best players. I even look at the quarterback position. I said, if they actually had better quarterback play, because they actually got really good wide receivers. People don't know that they got really good wide receivers.
Oh
They
yeah,
got a great offensive line. We know they got great running backs, good tight end play, and their defense as always has been outstanding under what was his name again? PJ Fleck.
PJ Fleck.
So yeah, they've always been a tier two team
So
to me in the Big Ten. It's just that if they could find a way to stay healthy and their quarterback play can get better, and I think it may with this new quarterback they got called Max Boomer, right?
yes,
Yeah, he seems like a real. I watched him last year. He looked like a pretty good quarterback. So if he can upgrade their quarterback position and they can avoid having serious injuries to their best players, they're a tier two team for sure and could be towards the top. I think they could be a number two to Penn State, and I would say Illinois. Here's my thing: I would put Indiana, Illinois in there for this upcoming year. And what Kirk Signetti's doing with that program right now is he's elevating it. He's even elevated the
if
recruiting.
yes, if he has another great season, TG,
He can officially stick there.
I think we have to look at Indiana as a serious player in the Big Ten,
Oh
something they
yes.
haven't been in a long, long time.
So I
Okay,
mean,
so
actually, the last time
let
they
me
were a
take
player in the
those
Big
teams.
Ten was 2020.
Yeah. Um, so let's take those teams a second. Then let's look at the what we'll call the tier two of the SEC.
Oh wait a minute! Before I also we get into that, I didn't mention Illinois. Brett Bielema keeps bringing Illinois up, and he keeps it up. They're officially a solid tier two team, just like Indiana.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, so you go over to the SEC. You got LSU and Brian Kelly, who I think Brian Kelly's an absolute moron, by the way. I don't think there's any nice way to put that.
Mhm.
His IQ is 40 points lower than Coach O's, I think. But I and Coach O, the only reason he got a national title is because he had Joe Burrow throwing to Jefferson and
Yeah.
Jamar Chase.
Yep.
Um, but who else goes in that second tier for you? Is Texas probably in the second tier?
Yeah, I would say they're at the top of the. Matter of
Yeah,
fact,
Texas, I think
well,
right
they're
now
the
has to be
tier.
number.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, they would have to be the number one right now. I think they can get into the number one as far as they can get into tier one, but it all depends on if Steve Sarkisian can do what Ryan Day did and actually give up the play calling. Because that's always gonna be the one thing that hurts Steve Sarkisian is, dude, you can't be a play caller and a head coach because you got to put your attention with everything.
right.
But I will say that when it comes down to it, yeah, I would put them at the top. Then I would put. I guess I would have to put LSU just cause of the championships, but that'd be it. And
So
then
so then at that point, are we looking like maybe Ole Miss, Tennessee?
yeah, Ole Miss,
What about
Tennessee,
South Carolina?
yeah, South Carolina too.
So that middle tier, and this is what I would say. We saw Iowa go heads up against an SEC team in Missouri.
They lost by 3 points. They could have won. They
Yes.
literally could have won that game by a touchdown or take it to overtime and had a chance to win it as well.
We saw the Big Ten dominate Tennessee. We
Hmm.
saw the Big Ten beat
Dominate
South
Texas.
Carolina.
Yeah.
We saw the Big Ten beat Texas.
Hmm.
Um, so if we look at that middle tier, TG, is that advantage Big Ten or advantage SEC to you, or kind of a push?
You can say it's kind of a push, but I would say right now it's advantage Big Ten just because we saw the middle tier of the Big Ten beat the middle tier of the SEC. So, oh, I would also put Missouri up there in the tier two as well. But yeah, no, I would say, and they're at the bottom of tier two, just like Iowa. But yeah, no, I would say the Big Ten has an advantage. And again, we probably should have been 6-0 if Iowa figures out, like, actually could get that field goal and gets to overtime or could actually get that touchdown. I think we're 6-0. So, in all fairness, I would say that That yeah, I think it's advantage Big Ten right now as well. But I will say you can push it because it could go either way at times. Because I'm not gonna lie, Texas is a great team. I would say
Yeah.
they're better than the other tier two teams in the Big Ten. Um, I would say that basically with South Carolina, they're better than some. Even though they did lose to Illinois, I will give them an advantage over Iowa and even right now over Indiana. Because again, I got to see Indiana, especially in the biggest moments, really thrive. But at least they lost against not North Carolina, freaking Notre Dame, who is a North
Yes.
team. So I kind of want to see more to Kirks and Indiana, but right now I would give South Carolina. But those are the only two teams I would think in the tier two that are better than some. Where the only team I would say that they're equal to is literally Penn State. That'd be the team I say they equal to, Penn State. Because Penn State can
Okay.
beat those teams, but and same with those teams. But when it comes to the big games, they tend to choke a lot.
Now let's look at and we left out some teams here. We didn't talk Texas A&M. We didn't talk
To,
too much about Florida. Both of those, I'm thinking, could fall into the bottom tier of tier two, but probably more
yeah,
likely the top of tier
I
three.
was actually saying they're more of the top of tier three than they are tier two because Texas A&M has been crap for a while. So
Especially given how much they paid for their roster.
yeah, that's even worse. So like
My
you
God,
pay a
if you're
lot,
going to pay that much for a roster, go out and win something.
right? At
But
USC, you want to do that too? Because that's kind of how
yeah,
I look at them in a sense right now.
so
Is
if we look at the let's just take the bottom five, let's say from each to kind of compare. Um, Bottom five in the SEC, we got Mississippi State, which was 2-10, 0-8 in the conference. The Kentucky Wildcats, 4-8, 1-7 in the conference. Auburn, 5-7, 2-6 in the conference. Oklahoma, which do I think this might be an aberration? I don't know. I don't know whether it's an aberration or just Oklahoma is that outmatched and made the worst move of their life by coming to the SEC. But they were 6-7, 2-6 in the conference. And this is where you have Vanderbilt and Arkansas at 7-5 or 7-6, 3-5 in the conference. So we went six teams there, and we're going to hop over and check out the six teams in the Big Ten that are on the bottom. And you've got Purdue, much like Mississippi State, 1-11, 0-9 in conference.
mhm.
Maryland, 4-8, 1-8 in conference. Northwestern, 4-8, 2-7 in conference. Wisconsin. Now, see these next three to me, it doesn't feel like they should be this low.
Mhm.
I'm going to say it's part scheduling, part they are not good right now, and then just a little bit of, give it some time because I think these programs are headed in the right direction. You've got Wisconsin at 5-7, 3-6. I feel very bad for Luke Fickle. The schedule makers did him no favors this year at all.
They really
He,
didn't.
he may have the toughest schedule in the nation this year.
He does, in my opinion. And I'm so sick of the other crap that we'll get into it.
Yeah. You got Michigan State, 5-7, 3-6 in the conference. I think Jonathan Smith is the guy for these guys.
He is
I do think he's going to be a solid coach. Is he ever going to be a top tier coach? Probably not.
probably
But
not.
he's a guy who's going to get these guys competing for bowl games.
Hmm.
And if you are the, uh, I would say, second favored team in your own state, uh, just being in the competition or the conversation for bowl games, I think is a good thing. Uh,
Yeah,
he's not a D'Antonio who's going to, you know, rebuild your program and nearly take you to glory. And then the next one, and this is another team that I'm kind of high on this year. I think they've got a good core to build around. That's Nebraska.
yeah.
They were 7-6 last year, 3-6 in the conference.
They finally broke that curse and got to a bowl game because they've been so close. And
I'm
then
telling you, I
man,
like Matt Rule as a coach.
hmm
I look for this to be a team that's more towards the upper middle of the conference this year. Would
more in
not
the
be
mid tier.
surprised. Yeah, I would be not be surprised at all to see this be an 8 to 9 win team this year.
I think they could be for sure.
So as we look at the lower tier, I think you look at those bottom three teams in both, and you say, "My God, these teams suck," and
Hmm.
they're just not going to get any better. Maryland under Michael Oxley, had a good run when they had Tua's little brother there.
Yep.
But and I feel
You know,
sorry
he
for
still got
Stoops
some
when
NFL talent there. That's what's funny. He
he
still got
does.
NFL talent there. It's just like I mean, I'm not sure if it's quarterback, but even when he did have NFL talent, it's like, dude, you should be. Because here's my thing with Maryland: you should be a mid-tier team in the Big Ten, but your coaching is what's cost you. Because you guys,
Yes.
like, let's be real, they've taken Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State to the limit and should have had some wins against these teams, if anything, but they choked. And it's the same with some of the games they have lost. Like, I'm like with Mike Loxley, as much as we all criticize James Franklin, at least he don't do the Mike Loxley where he lose games he has no business losing to with the talent he has. Like, Mike Loxley be losing games that he shouldn't be losing because it's like, dude, you got talent. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, and Mike Loxley is somebody who I've always questioned. I kind of questioned how he got the job of being a head coach. Because if you look at this guy, if you look at his win-loss record outside of the years he had uh Talia, which were what 2021, 2022, 2023,
Hmm.
he's never had more than 4 wins in a season. He's been coaching since 2009 as a head coach. Now, yeah. Now he was off in 2013 and off in 16, 17, and 18. But here's the guy with 7 years as a head coach, and he's 33 and 41 overall. And of those 33 wins, 23 of them came in the Talia era. So he's only had 10 wins outside of Talia's years. So yeah, I agree with you. Coaching is the issue at Maryland. It's not talent. Um, okay, so getting back to the conversation overall, Ohio State, or I'm sorry, Big Ten or SEC? Who do you think has the favorable bottom end?
Bro,
Does
that's a
does
toss.
Oklahoma make a big difference, or does Nebraska offset Oklahoma in your opinion? As
To
I
be
see these
honest,
as two teams going in different directions, I think Nebraska is actually ahead of Oklahoma right now.
yeah, I would say Satasa because I do think the SEC's bottom tier is pretty good, except for obviously a couple teams. But I will say it depends on how Oklahoma is, because I'm not gonna lie, I do think Nebraska does upset Oklahoma because they've been terrible. And it's not like, and I know for a lot of people probably try to make the argument that they made it from from the Big 12 to the SEC. But guys, we just saw Texas get to the SEC, and this is how you know. Like, if you're the SEC, you got to be asking yourself this question: are you
How
really
good
as
are
good as
you?
you say you are?
Yeah,
Because it's like you let a Big 12 team in Texas come in there and be your last hope in the playoffs. I mean, they came in there and just straight up was great. So
and the first thing the SEC fans are going to say, well, look at you. Oregon in the regular season took down your prized possession in the Ohio State Buckeyes.
yeah, and
Oregon came in
if they know
and won
anything
the
about
Big
Ohio
Ten
State and
title.
if they know anything about Ohio State and Oregon, it actually has been a rivalry for a little bit. Not fully like what we see with Michigan and Penn State,
No,
but
but
it has been a
yeah,
little bit of a rivalry between the two programs. And the the game that we lost our offensive lineman. Like, whether people know that or not, we lost our offensive lineman in that game. We lost Joshua Simmons. We lost we did actually lose Tegra for a little bit. Now, while he came back, he didn't finish because
and
he had a back injury. And it's like, thank God it didn't cost him to go out for the rest of the
and
season.
we've
But
all watched the film TG. There's an argument to be made that the officiating blew the call. Now, would they have hit the kick?
yeah,
Would they have not hit the kick?
I think they
We don't
would
know.
have because
Well,
remember,
I agree. I think they would have,
I
but
don't think Fielding had the injury by that point, because you have to remember he
yeah,
said it, he was kicking with an injury for the rest of the season. Now, I don't know when he got injured, but I know it wasn't during the Oregon game. It
yeah.
was after the Oregon game at some point he got injured. So I don't know when it happened, but I will say I do think he can make a 46-yard field goal. I think he could, at least fully healthy. Um and when I look at again with Oregon, they've always been a pretty good team. But the one time Ohio State loses to them is because Jim Knowles is calling a crappy defense. Because even the defensive players of Ohio State called him out on that. Ryan Day was on his neck, and same with Larry Johnson. They were all on his neck about that defensive play calling he was doing. And then, like I said, we suffered injuries on the offensive side of the ball that impacted our offense. Because while people were talking about how easy it was, or better yet, how even it was across the line of scrimmage, how Ohio State wasn't really dominating the line of scrimmage, people don't take into context or really don't go into context about how that was to be. Because in the first half, Ohio State was dominating the line of scrimmage. We were running the ball at a successful rate. And then the injuries kicked in, and the running the ball was never the same since.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, we
Well,
lost
and
that
not
game,
let's not
but
forget Quinshon went down with an injury in that one too, didn't he? At one point, or no, he was playing with an injury.
yeah, he was playing with
He was
injury. It
playing
was
with
this,
the hand, right?
yeah, like his
Yeah.
hand or forearm. It was, I think it was his
Which
hand.
arguably could have definitely resulted in that fumble he had.
Yeah, so like when you kind of look at it, Ohio State dealt with injuries. Like if we were fully healthy, like even when we weren't playing our best,
And these aren't excuses. Understand, these aren't
and
excuses.
even though we weren't playing our best, we absolutely should have won that game. But it's like we
Yes.
got effed over by the officiating. We also made mistakes on offense too. I'm not gonna ignore that. We did make some mistakes. Our offense made some mistakes because it was like Will Howard when he had the ball in his hand and we were getting ready to or not the ball in his hand, but he was snapping the ball at the line of scrimmage. When the ball was snapped to him, he dropped it, which caused it to go
Right.
to a fourth and long. And if he didn't do that, we probably go to a fourth and short, do the tush push, and get the first down. But instead, because of that, we end up having to punt, and we made
But
so
as
many
Ryan Day
mistakes.
does, he goes out and he corrects the mistakes. That's
Yeah,
one thing Ryan Day may be better at than anybody else in the country is fixing the problem once he sees it. And what happened? We go out in the Rose Bowl.
and we beat
We
them.
left no doubt. It wasn't just a beating. It was a left no doubt game, 41-21, and it could have been 63-21, but Ohio State took their foot off the gas.
Oh yeah, absolutely could have been, but of course they took their foot off the gas. But it's like, yeah, we've had this before, and like Oregon had a really good team. They had a playoff team. I'm not gonna lie. There was no lie about that. And Oregon has made it to the
Again,
national
number
championship
one
game
team in
before.
the country going into the playoff, and
Right,
deservedly so.
right. Like they were the number one team, and so it's like it made sense. Now people didn't think that until they beat Ohio State, and so we got that discussion. But they were still a great team, and I'm gonna make an argument they were better than most of the SEC
Okay,
teams.
so that brings me to a few questions. First of all, should Pavia be a little more focused on getting Vanderbilt to the next level
Yeah.
instead of worrying about what's going on with the battle of the conferences?
Yeah, I think that's what he should. Really, here's my thing with Pavia. You need to shut your mouth. Cause dude, you caught teams off guard last year. You're not gonna do that again.
No,
Like they're gonna be
no.
more ready for you. And the more you keep opening your mouth, the more teams are gonna want to smack you. If you don't believe me, just ask what team was that was running their mouth that had a good season?
Was it you talk about Tennessee when they came up into the shoe was with their shirts off and talking
Yeah,
crap
basically.
and
Well, that's one of them. That's one of them. That's one of them. That's one of them. I think the other one was there was another team who was doing that in the regular season, and I think it was a Big Ten team that was talking a lot of smack, and then they got pushed right back down. I forget who that was, but I remember this had happened before because it's like we've seen teams that have run their mouth after doing super well and then get
oh,
smacked. So it's
Was
like,
it
no, you
Indiana?
need to shut up.
Was it Indiana?
What
Because
was that?
that I think
Because you,
Signetti was doing
Chris.
some trash talking,
Oh, Indiana. Yep, that was the one. Indiana, because he was talking
which of
trash
course led to
and got smacked by Ohio State.
Will Howard putting out the
Will Howard
sig. You
doing
know,
the Google that. Yeah,
yeah.
Google that is what he said. So
So
yeah, no, like that's one of them is like Indiana, because it's like, dude, if you didn't run your mouth, probably Ohio State wouldn't have had a reason to be kind of petty.
yeah. So here's my thing on this, Diego. We would welcome a challenge in the Big Ten. We would welcome you guys coming in and actually playing a out of conference game against Big Ten teams every year. And let's tear them up. Let's make it Ohio
Hmm.
State, Georgia, if that's the two top teams. Let's make it Penn State, Texas, if they're the two top teams. Let's make it, let's not slate it as a particular team. Let's slate it as a seed. And let's match them up that way.
Yeah,
We would welcome
Here would be
that.
my thing though.
But
For the
you,
SEC, you're gonna have to really make your conference schedule 9 conference games. And I'm not gonna lie, this excuse that y'all have been using about y'all freaking conference is straight up caca.
yeah,
It
don't
is.
mistake class
Like
and
again.
tradition for actual softness, guys. It's just simple. You guys come into Big Ten country, you're gonna get your butts whooped. It's that simple. You're
hmm
gonna get your butts whooped. So
You know what
don't
I
run
find
your
super
mouth
funny?
until you get on the field and do something. What's that?
You know what I find super funny too? Because remember we
What?
talked about how like Texas was like dodging the night game against Ohio State
Yeah, yeah,
to play the
absolutely.
noon game. Remember, as I will say this all the time, for Texas, you will probably be playing Ohio State at night. So if you lose to Ohio State in a night game, that would be something else. Because I always say this, you've arrived when you beat a team like that in a tough manner, like when you do it
Yeah,
in a
marquee game.
yeah, when you do it in a marquee game, I'm sorry guys, I had something flying around in my face. But when you have a marquee game that happens and it's a night game, like look what happened with Ohio State against Notre Dame. Like I get it, we all hate Kyle McCord for the granted, but that dude actually went into a night game against Notre Dame and delivered a game-winning drive. And again, there are probably passes in that game that should have been picked off. But hey, at
Absolutely.
least he gave us. Hey, at least he gave us a chance to win. At least put off the game-winning drive and he won. So
Yeah.
give him credit for that. But and we've even had this with CJ Stroud too. We've had this with multiple. Like that's how you know you've arrived is when you are able to go into big time games in tough environments and you've arrived. Because like I said, if Ohio State does that in 26 to Texas, like you better shut your mouth about night games from here on out. And if you're talking
Yeah.
about a noon game down in Texas, that's not going to bother Ohio State either because they're so used to playing noon games so dang much to a point where it's like that ain't gonna bother them.
No. No, noon games are like the bread and butter for Ohio State at this point.
And so are night games. That's why
Yeah.
when we have night games, I mean, ask Tennessee what it was like playing in a night game in the shoe.
Which is why nobody wants to play a night game in this shoe, especially a team from the SEC.
Mm-hmm. Because why
Okay,
wouldn't you?
well, let me tell you, this has been a great conversation. Uh, Final parting thoughts.
My final part of thoughts is when it comes to the SEC, you got to stop running your mouth, dude. We're on an even playing field now. If you guys want to prove that you're the best conference, do it on an even playing field where you don't have a competitive advantage. And if you can't do that, then you're not the great conference everybody says you are. You're not. You're not. You're not this conference that everybody says you are. You're not the conference you prop yourself up to be. You are just another conference, just like every other conference. If anything, the Big Ten better than you because when it's on an even playing field, they are. So prove it, SEC. You're the best conference. Prove it on the even playing field where you don't have a competitive advantage. Prove it.
Now, my final take is simply this, SEC fans. Here at the OHIO podcast, respect is earned, not just claimed.
And we respect Georgia and Bama.
And we do respect Georgia and we do respect Alabama. And more than anything, we do respect Nick Saban, who has led to this myth that the SEC is some powerhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And we found out last year firsthand, watching what Texas did, that all that the SEC really is with Saban gone is the Big 12 on steroids. That's it. That's it.
True.
So if you want to prove it, if you want to talk this crap, earn it on the field. Earn it on the field. All right, guys. So
Mm-hmm.
hope you enjoyed tonight's show. Be sure to like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you don't miss the next time we're breaking headlines with some truth and some scarlet and gray heat. Until next time, for TG from the Buckeye Lounge, I am the Wild Man Chris Wilds, and this has been the OHIO podcast. OH,
Io.
go Bucks.
Go Bucks.